Hello and happy Monday lunchtime. I'm going to bring on our guests here and ask them to join us. I'm very excited for this interview today. Joining us, and hopefully they'll get on here live in just a moment. That was so fast.
Why am I sideways?
We got you both here. We got. This will be. There we go. There we go. Don't input for Dana. All of us.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Oh my gosh. Well, good to see you. I have to tell you, hello. They miss you. Miss you all being here. And thanks for coming today. I'm a little under the weather. So hopefully I'm not coughing and sneezing on all of you, but you're far away, so you can't get it from me. But thank you for coming. So let me just say hello. There's a bunch of folks joining us live. Thank you for joining us live. My name is Julie Hirschberg. I'm a neurologic physical therapist and the owner and founder of re+active, where I got to meet the amazing Dana and her mom, Becky. We met, it feels like a long time ago, actually. It feels like a very long time ago. So I got to meet Dana and her parents when they were looking for an integrated program. And so I got to do that consult, which is one of my favorite things. But then you got to come and I got to see you running down the hallway while you were here, which was so fun. And I asked them to share a little bit about their experience and kind of what brought you to re+active and all of that great stuff. So Dana, I feel like maybe if we could start with you and you could just share a little bit about your story and kind of what brought you to re+active.
Okay. My mom's really giving me the vestibular test right now. So I think there's like a few phases to my story. There is, the flare up that brought me to re+active, and then there's kind of where it started, which I feel like might be relevant to some of the questions you might ask. I'm going to do my best to make it fairly concise. Essentially, this all started in 2015. I was a senior in high school and got viral meningitis, and I had some lingering effects afterwards. I was told it was an essential tremor, was never really given any description of what that meant, and that was it. I went through college. I was constantly having mysterious illnesses. I'm sure my family, every other week, it seemed like something was happening with me. No one really knew what was happening. I didn't know anything was connected. Fast forward to, I graduated in 2019 and I wanted to go back to a neurologist to just simply understand what my diagnosis was. I was in this weird position where I didn't know if things were going to get worse throughout my life. I didn't know what I could do to make things better and was kind of grasping at straws for the first time. So I saw a neurologist in Chicago, and this is when I was told I was misdiagnosed and that I had functional neurological disorder. And the reason I want to include that is my initial diagnosis was in a very positive framework. I felt confident and happy and supported by the diagnosis. I then went through PTOT up until about the beginning of COVID, and then was told I kind of plateaued and essentially graduated from the program. We're going to fast forward a little more. I moved to Philadelphia in 2021 and just wanted to reestablish care with a neurologist. I wasn't cured of FND. I still had a lot going on, and just someone to ask questions to. Naturally, with the healthcare system, took a very long time to get in with someone. Finally got in with a neurologist in September 2022. Was told they thought I had something really, really serious. Went through the whole rounds of testing again. and PT to then be told this is just something from viral meningitis and it could be worse. So that ended in November 2022. I then very naively said, I'm just gonna do what I want, and I don't want to have to focus on all these problems with my body. I'm just gonna do something. So naturally, I signed up to run a half marathon. I signed up in January. It wasn't supposed to be till March, and essentially, I've always been a fairly active person. My job requires me to be on my feet all the time, and I only got 3 runs down, and I want to say the most is it was under a mile and a half, and I stopped after every run. I couldn't see straight. I thought I was going to pass out, and I couldn't tell. To me, I have run 1 half marathon in my life. That makes me sound like a big runner. I don't know if I ever ran again in between that, but it didn't seem right. That was my only kind of cue that something wasn't happening correctly, and my migraines, which I was told were leftover from viral meningitis, were not just lingering, but they were intensifying. So where it was about 2 weeks straight of migraines. Fast forward, at the very end of January, I essentially had like a medical emergency at work. Took me to the ER. I was having full body spasms, couldn't breathe, a bunch of symptoms, went through the gamut, being sent home, pulled every string to finally get in with a neurologist, and essentially went back through the FND journey again with a new PT. For months, I kept feeling like there was something more. I knew there had to be something to trigger a new flare-up. Nothing felt like it was changing in my life. I kept naturally being asked, were you under more stress? How's your mental health? All this to say, I work in the psychosocial field. I believe mental health is incredibly important, but I also know there's many, many things beyond mental health that are important to look at, and to not just stop when it gets to mental health. So that I got into a neurologist in February of 2023. It wasn't until April 2023 that I was then diagnosed with POTS after pushing for my doctors to listen that there was something wrong with the heart rate that was popping up on my watch. I then got in with a neurologist for migraines, and essentially was just going through the motions without any progress. I went from working full days on my feet every day, all day, to about a week after that health incident, I was out of work and I was on medical leave. I would be exhausted from taking a shower. I couldn't figure out what was happening, where my symptoms were coming through, and I knew there was something that wasn't being addressed. I went through about 7-8 months of my team that I had in Philadelphia and PT to then be discharged because I was being told I was regressing and not making progress. And I was almost out of medical leave from work, and essentially was grasping at straws once again, because myself and my family knew there had to be something more. There had to be something that could happen. And I was very, very fortunate that a therapist that must have heard a presentation from re+active at one point for their clinic and said, this place is in LA. I know that's far. Maybe just go on their website. I think they have a much more productive and supportive approach to FND, which seems to be all that you're talking to me about. That no one's listening. That is all you're talking about in our therapy sessions, that you're not with the right doctors. I went on. She wasn't even suggesting to go to LA, and immediately called my family to say, this seems to be exactly what I've been telling everyone I've needed for 7-8 months. And about 2 weeks later, I think the deposit was down. So yeah, that was my not very condensed version, but that's my medical history for everyone out there.
Yeah, well, and thank you for sharing all of that too, because it's quite the journey. And you know what? I think it's helpful for other people to hear, because it's not that uncommon that people have had to push and advocate and push a little more, and knew there was something else there as well. And you did that. And I know that that also took a lot for you and your family
Yeah.
to keep going and pushing. And I'm so glad you found us too.
Thank you.
um,
And
and
Julie, if I can say one thing,
yeah, Becky, I was
when
just
we
gonna
when
ask
we
you.
did have the interview with you,
The
Dana's
consult.
in Philadelphia, the consult. Dana's in Philadelphia, we're in Indiana, and it's literally, first of all, I could see your brain and eyes turning as Dana spoke of ideas, and that was huge. And it literally, Dana, I won't cry. Like, it's the first time we
Yeah.
saw Dana's like shoulders relaxed, and we could tell. We hung up from that call and we said, someone's listening to her for the very first, besides that initial diagnosis, that one other doctor, we felt like finally someone was believing in her. And that was huge. Just from her body language, we could tell this was something that we needed to investigate and figure out how to make work.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. It's funny. I don't have a poker face at all, but
Neither does my mom.
when I'm with people on a consult, I am like going into like, ooh, there's this piece and there's this piece. And I remember we went on for a while on that consult because there were a lot of pieces. No, there were a lot of pieces to put together. The autonomic piece. There were pieces that just hadn't quite been addressed. You went from wanting to train for a half marathon and being on your feet all day to not, and there was just like this big gap of like, no, you can't just go back to work from 20 minutes of activity to 8 hours of activity. It's not how the autonomic nervous system works, especially with POTS. And I can remember that so clearly from your consult. And one of the reasons we do these interviews is for other clinicians. And so Becky, thank you for saying that, because I think our healthcare system's not always set up well for people to be heard and really listened to. And sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it takes some repetition. And that's one of my like main reasons for getting uncomfortable and doing lives, is to keep encouraging people to listen and hear the whole story. Because I think, Dana and Becky, both of you have so much wisdom about what has happened that like you had the answers, and I could just kind of go, okay, yeah, I see this and I see this, and we've got a team for this to really put it together.
And the key that Dana kept saying to us, because again, the tiny little videos we were allowed to see because they stopped videoing and they said, don't pay attention to your walking.
In Philadelphia.
In Philly.
Before I got
she kept saying to us, yeah, I can walk a little better, but the quality of my life has not changed. I cannot do anything else except Uber for 1 hour and have dinner with a friend. And that hit home.
Yeah. The life, getting back to those pieces of life, which is so important. And I guess, I mean, if we could jump ahead then, so you took the trek out here across the US. You couldn't really get a whole lot further. Maybe if we start at the end, what do you see for yourself now? What are you doing now that you couldn't do before?
Yeah, so I mentioned very quickly in my very long story that simply taking a shower took all of my energy. My mom mentioned getting dinner with friends. That was few and far between because I was pushing myself past my max to be able to balance myself in the chair, to be able to socialize, all these different things to figure out if it was going to be accessible enough for me, the environment. So I was really doing nothing. I went from being the symptoms that were still lingering from FMD for me before this flare up. I could mask enough, I guess you could say. I was still doing most of the things I wanted to do in life, to essentially being in my apartment 24/7. And I got back from reactive, I want to say about 2 weeks ago. Time's a bit of a blur, but there was a huge family conference call the other day that I was able to walk the 3 minutes to CVS to pick up my prescription and pick up a milkshake on the way back home and make it to my apartment. So something that, you know, seems so minute, and unlike LA, I live in a very walkable city. So I would constantly be putting in the address for Uber, and I would say, "Are you sure you want to take this Uber? Your pickup and drop off are very close together." So being able to do something independently was huge. I'm also in talks with work to be able to begin to phase back into work. With a lot of the autonomic pieces, we don't want to do too much too soon and burn my body out. I can say even the few days of the Thanksgiving madness was a lot for my nervous system. And essentially the reason I haven't started yet is more logistics with work. I was nowhere near close to a conversation with work about going back. I was essentially in this conversation of going back to work because the timeline was up. I had no strategies to go back, and I work in healthcare. So there was the fear on my part of, I'm going to go back and not only be a danger to myself, but how am I going to be beneficial for any patient? And how am I going to have the confidence that I currently don't have in my body, and to be able to like project that for someone else? So I've already had a few social plans. I mean, my life is night and day. It's a bit odd. I'm like transitioning. It doesn't feel like I'm transitioning like back to life. Like my alternative life was my normal for so long, and I'm on this kind of new journey. All that to say, there are still things that I'm working on with providers that Reactive was able to set me up with to ease that transition. But it's the first time in almost a year that I'm able to have a choice in what I want to do in my day. I remember Devin was a PT student when I was there, and he said, "What are you excited to do when you go back to Philly? Like, is there a restaurant you've missed?" And I was trying to explain, like, I don't know, because for a year, I could not pick what I wanted to do in a day. My day was very dictated by my body. And to now be able to be like, what do I want to do with my afternoon, is a wild concept that's taking its own adjustment, but a wonderful spot to be in. That as much faith as we had in Reactive, I don't think myself nor my family could even picture me doing that. My mom.
I think also, well, like your website, one thing I want to say, I remember when we went on your website and I showed I come from a family that is big to find the best healthcare, and
a long line of critical things.
Right. The whole family was like, "Oh my gosh, this website is Dana." But you talked about the clients leaving with a tool chest and of strategies. And I remember thinking, we've heard that before. Dana's gone through PT. She's gotten the squishy ball. And I was so impressed. Dana allowed me to sit in the last OT. And it wasn't, here are the 10 things that work the best for you, Dana. It was like, can you tell us, what do you think are the top 10 strategies? That ownership to me was everything. And I, for the first time, and I'm not putting Dana down, but I see her, she finally has tools. Like, we were just in Philadelphia for Thanksgiving, and she didn't talk about such little things to me. She went shopping. I haven't shopped with my daughter in like a year.
That's
she
really
went to
emotional.
3 stores, but she knew there were chairs that she could sit down. Another day, we were going to go on Black Friday, and she said, "I think that maybe I should conserve my energy so I can go bowling." My daughter went bowling with the family. Like, just to hear her have that tool chest now, yes, she still might have to plan and think, but it is stuff that can give her life back. And that just is incredible to us.
I think off of what my mom just said, of sitting in on the last session and, you know, having that autonomy and what worked best for me, I think moving it all back to the consult, to my first appointments, the biggest difference to me was that I was not treated as an unreliable witness. So I work in healthcare. I can sometimes, just like my mom could see your wheels turning, I could also see doctors beginning to label me as the difficult patient. I know what happens, you know, when someone is that difficult patient. But on top of that, I would try to be as eloquent as possible and be as efficient as possible in my delivery. This has been talked about with the reactive team. And I could see them go, yeah, okay. Everything I said was taken with a grain of salt. It was of like, okay, you think you know what proprioception is, great. Like, we'll be the judge of that. And again, I am not a movement disorder specialist, but I've had 10 years of going to doctors and having to articulate what I am feeling in my body, the disconnect with my body, what has been happening. I have much more history than that I can explain about my body that no doctor knows about my specific body. And no one took that as a tool that was worth investigating until I came to reactive. And that was the biggest switch to me, that I didn't have to plead every time I spoke. I could say something and trust that it was going to be heard and it was going to be factored into a decision.
Yeah.
She was heard. She was
Yeah.
heard, and the whole family could tell that. I would pick Dana up. I would be waiting in the garage, and she would get off the elevator. And before she was in the car, she was sending the family group chat videos of what she did. And before, in her past therapy, we were told very little of what went on. And she said, I need to process it. And sometimes she would share and sometimes she wouldn't. But literally every session, she could not wait to share with her father, brother, sister-in-law. It was incredible.
Yeah. That, I mean, I'm so glad, because that is our philosophy, is that you are the wise one, Dana. You are the one that knows you the best. And when we can actually take in what you bring, I think then we can come together with some really, you know, again, not just the squishy ball of a tool, which squishy balls are great. I love my squishy balls, but to have like a whole ability to think about your day and to plan ahead and to like really make decisions day to day, to help you. That's so powerful. And again, for all of our clinician friends that are watching this, it just can't be understated. And you know this by being in the healthcare world, that sometimes people get labeled as having too many questions or sharing too much, or which I just think there's no such thing at all. Actually, I think we get more when somebody brings more. It's still such a problem in our healthcare system. You're not a difficult patient, Dana.
Thank you.
And you never were. Now, you already shared so much about kind of building up these tools and understanding yourself. I wonder if you can share a little bit about something that you learned about yourself, or something that you brought home from each of the therapies. You had physical therapy, you had occupational therapy, you had psychology.
Yeah, so I think as you were speaking about the squishy ball, this is a good example, and I think goes back into the decision to come. My mom and I had very different coping styles about what do we need to know before we come, which kind of goes into the toolkit. She reached out to Reactive to see if anyone was willing to speak with her, a past patient, client, and I said, I just want to know if it's the thumbs up or thumbs down. I know if I search for too much information, it's too similar. I'm going to be comparing it to all my last situations. And I don't want to go in with that thought of, I've done this before. And so a really easy case with I've done this before is a distraction. So I was told with a former PT that if I didn't have POTS, if I grew up a tennis player, if I picked up a tennis racket, I would instantly be able to do it. And one of my first days at Reactive, I picked up a tennis racket. And not surprisingly, there were some natural movements that came out. It was, you know, buried in my brain and it remembered that. However, Reactive was the first place that understood the nuance. So I was very quick to say, I know we're getting excited, but I just told my brain to take 3 steps and it only took 1. And they said, yeah, we see you definitely we need more tools there. We need to work on a few things, but you know, we want to recreate some of those things. And that was the first time someone saw like a caveat to something and that it wasn't just a black and white statement. I had this fear with providers that if it showed that distraction worked, it was going to prove that nothing was really happening. And so one of the first tools, my mom's going to laugh because I have a nickname when I try to describe it to my family, is the body braid. So a lot of compression, I called it Spanx on steroids to get my family to understand. And the first day I came in and we put it on my body. I had not taken a natural step in about 8 months, I want to say. And we put it on and I like gasped. It takes a lot to surprise me at this point in the journey. And I described it as my leg was slingshotting forward, just one side of my body, but I felt movement that I was not thinking about, that was not, okay, I just watched a PT do this, how do I recreate that motion in my body? It was just plain and simple, the connection worked and my body was doing what it needed to do without me doing other things. And it was the first time, it was like permission that know that this is not just your mind, not just your body. There are external cueing, external tools that your body needs to get better, and that's okay. This was the first time anyone said, let's try this, let's put this on your body and see what it does. I got home and I organized a whole cart with all my tools. This is the first time, and I had a whole conversation with my last appointments. There were a couple things I wanted to iron out. I said, let me understand this. If I get sick again, which I have a track record of doing so, is the thought that some of these movements may come on, but now I have the extra tools to be able to kind of stop it in its track. And hopefully over the years, that response is going to be much less pronounced. And I got a yes. Before that, I thought this was FND specifically, a chronic illness that I was going to have, that I was told kind of every time a new diagnosis came on, a new illness came on, I was at risk of this flare-up. I'm only 26. I don't really want to go another 9 months out of work. So didn't seem like a great feature. There was just so many little things. I know my mom mentioned the videos, but my mom is a speech pathologist, so understands this world a little better. Both my dad and brother are business, left brain, right brain, all that stuff. It was the first time I've had any healthcare in my life that I could send my brother a video with one sentence, and he said, that makes sense to me. Reactive was able to break things down to such black and white and such an abstract diagnosis. One of the first days we realized that like my nerves were tight and it wasn't just my muscles. And so no, if I just stopped thinking about my spasms, they were not going to stop because there was something more biologically and physically. Usually my brother would be like, okay, I don't really know what's happening, but if it works for you. And right away he was like, Mom, I don't know what that Spanx thing is Dana's talking about, but can she buy that? It was just night and day. So not only did it make sense to me, but it made sense to other people in my life. And I think that's so important, regardless of your age, that everyone now understood. It wasn't this abstract concept. That was a much more roundabout answer to your question. Not quite sure if I got it, but
well, another so Dana talked about this flare up she had at the hospital. I'm sorry, at her work, the hospital, and had to go to the hospital, and they gave her some IV cocktail that stopped it. And then 2 days later, she had another one. And I remember the neurologist in Philadelphia said to Dana, "What strategy do you have if this happens again?" And I was like, you're the doctor, tell us, what is she supposed to do?
No, they
So one day,
specifically said, well, next time you get sick, how are you going to prevent your mind? How are you going to tell your mind that you're okay and that you're safe, so this doesn't happen again? So that is a very short description and very brief example. There was a lot of blame put on me and a lot of, you are the cause of this.
Right, but my fear was, what if we don't know what to do? So one day I was going to come in the middle of her session, and they were going to come in the car. Dana gets very car sick. Reactive has figured out many reasons why, and we were testing out a bunch of strategies and tools. And Dana called me and she said, I'm having one of the episodes if you want to come watch as they try to help me. Your team,
please come in and watch.
Your team, I called my husband. I mean, Dana says 2 hours. I watched for an hour and 45 minutes. One thing after another. Let's try her prone. Let's try her this way. Put her upside down. We're going to put cold compresses on her. Show her humor. I mean, it was, and even the grad student, Gabby, was phenomenal.
She's going to cry talking about
I
Gabby.
know.
That's what's going to do her in.
But that to me was so impressive. Isn't even the word. I can't put words into reactive, because they did not run out of ideas, and we left reactive after Dana's 2 hours of therapy, and her body had calmed down. She was wiped out. She needed to leave in a wheelchair. She napped for the afternoon, but she got up and went to dinner with a college friend of mine. In the past, Dana would have been down and out for 48 hours. I mean, that was so huge. So we learned tool. When Dana flew home, they told her about the ice compressions, and she had a little thermos that we got ice in a baggie, and she knew before she landed to put it up and down her arm. I mean, never has she gotten those kind of really, what do I want to say? Like individualized tools, concrete individualized tools that help her systems,
and the
all
last
her systems.
Time I had this flare up, essentially, this episode within my flare up, I guess we could say, when I was at a physical therapy place. I came in with this episode. I later found out they were screening me for a panic attack, and I was sent home. They didn't think they could do anything with me that day. My uncle had to essentially almost carry me out of the building. They said, if it gets worse, go to the ER. And my body lasted in that constant spasms for about 3 days. So that was just the difference, and that's why I told her to come in, because yes, it's scary, but I kept asking people, what are the red flags? How do I know if I'm safe? What do I do when this happens? And I was told, just go home. I slept and it would still happen. And right away, within that episode, and also other times when things weren't working, usually I've had past clinicians that go, okay, well, try something new next time. And this was the first time that either they could see something wasn't clicking with my brain, or I was having this episode and my body really needed to regulate. And if something didn't work, immediately there was another solution.
It was fascinating.
I never felt any blame, which naturally no one should, but there was never a moment of like, well, Dana, this works for most people. I don't know why it isn't working for you. It was like, no, we're gonna keep going. And finally, someone else was like the shoulder to lean on in that situation, instead of like, go deal with it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Let's find something together. And it turns out for you, somebody in the chat asked about the ice thing. It turns out for you, based on what your team found, like this is something, ice can be very helpful autonomically and also sensory for people. And everybody's different. So this is where I'm like, this is not medical advice for the whole world. Some people do well with ice on their neck. Other people, it's on their arms or maybe their legs. Other people, it could actually cause a spasm. So it's not necessarily that the one thing works every time. But that you and your team discovered together kind of a bunch of things, and they're not all autonomic or sensory. I mean, you found physical impairments like nerve mobility, like the joint mobility and proprioception that the body braid is so helpful for. Those are things that can contribute to symptoms, but they're not FND, right? Like they're underlying physical components that I always have to tell therapists, like, don't forget this person has a body, and like that might be one of the contributing pieces. And it sounds like you and your team were able to find not just one thing, but like maybe hundreds, and maybe even a way for you to go, well, if that's not working, maybe I'll try this, or I'll try this, or like you can kind of get creative yourself, right?
It was definitely a collaboration throughout. You know, again, I was treated as a reliable witness, so I'd never had a moment where I was like, I had several times, not even just in, you know, like crisis mode, where I'd say, okay, that stabilization of that muscle worked for this exercise. Do we think it would work with the stairs? Just a random example. Don't know if I said that. But they would go, sure, let's try it. There wasn't a like, Dana, you didn't go to school for this. So, you know, it just took some weight, some pressure off of everything. And I think an important component, even between my mom and I, like, I'm definitely data driven, especially after having had so many unsuccessful trials of things. So it was really important for me to understand why things were working for my body, and like, what is the reasoning behind this? And okay, how come, like, draw the line for me. If I can't really feel what, if you're touching my shoulder and I can't really feel that, how does that contribute to the walking? Like, draw that diagram for me. Some others, like, that might have been too much information, but I was craving the reasoning. I wanted to be like, no, this is like in black and white why this is working. This isn't just magic. Some people, magic might have been a great answer for them, but I really needed to know the answers for things. And again, when you were saying like there's not too many questions, there was never an eye roll at the last second question 30 seconds before the next patient was supposed to walk into the room. I think that goes back to the individualistic part, because my mom was like, great, if it's working, I'm happy with it. And I was like, but why? So just another part of that.
And that's why you are amazing in healthcare. I think it's the but why is what like gets us deeper, gets us stronger in understanding things. And that is actually what gave you more than a toolbox. Like, because you know the why, if one tool doesn't work one day because the atmospheric pressure is different, you can go, well, because I know why, I can think of, it's like you took physics and you took all of the courses.
Wasn't necessarily good at it, but
but it's like you got the understanding. Yeah.
And I think for me, I think a big reason that was important is it was a way to reaffirm after years of being told this is in your head, this is your cause, this is a mental health problem. It was a way to, like, in black and white, stop that path, you know, stop that spiral and be like, no, that spasm is not continuing because I'm thinking about it. We've gone through this. This is what we found. And okay, now that I know I'm not causing it, how can I stop it? And that was a much easier path for me to go down. Again, very specifically me, that I could get out of that framework that I've been told of, like, this is all your fault. And that's, you can have as much knowledge of many things, the longer you're told something and the more often you're told something, it's hard to have to lose any of that doubt. So that was another thing that was just important, and my start of my recovery and my continued recovery, to be able to have those facts that I could base it on, beyond what I was told.
Yeah, that's huge to know and understand it's not you causing it. Is so massive. And what an important first, like, that's almost the first step of like, I know I'm not causing this, but I've been told I've been causing this, but what is causing this, right? So to have those answers is huge. I heard from somebody else in the chat that like this story sounds really familiar. And I think what I hear from a lot of folks is not the same story, but a story of kind of they've been told it's their fault. They just need to change their thinking magically and things will get better. Or they've just been discouraged frequently along a healthcare journey, and quite honestly traumatized by some healthcare providers too. So I wonder, what would you share with a person who maybe has FND, maybe has POTS, has uncontrolled migraine like you have had? What message would you tell them to keep going when you know it's hard?
Yeah,
Go to
I think
reactive.
my mom's the biggest fan.
We're gonna hire Becky for.
I'm the new PR person for reactive.
I don't know who she's firing, but I think there's a couple things. I think one of the reasons reactive was a great fit for me is because I kept feeling like in these physician appointments, we were trying to isolate a lot of my symptoms. Naturally, all my symptoms were impacting each other. When I went to reactive, everyone was looking at everything. But there also wasn't this necessity within the appointment to be like, nope, that's POTS, or that's FND, or nope, that's controllable, that's functional. We were just working on it. And I think a big part is finding a place. Everywhere else was telling me, oh, you got another diagnosis, or like, that's an interesting combination. And then I went on reactive and it seemed to be a fairly normal combination of diagnoses. So I think it's important to find somewhere that, again, will see the full picture, whether that's holistically see the full picture, but then also to be able to look at multiple diagnoses at the same time. I think there's so much exhaustion that comes from 12 million specialists, and no specialist is communicating, and all those specialists need to do that, and everything overlaps. And I think there's a lot of, with some of these diagnoses, it can be difficult because people are telling you to not focus on what your body's doing and that you need to distract yourself from what your body's doing. But then to advocate for yourself, you need to know what your body is doing. And you also need to know what your body is doing to be able to still have that faith of this is not normal. Not necessarily this is the worst thing in the world, but this is not correct. And there needs to be something done. We need to do something to fix this. And so I think it's, as much as you can, trusting your gut is the biggest thing. I think also I have clearly a very, very supportive family that I'm very lucky for. I'm very grateful for, but there were very specific boundaries I set. Just like how my mom was saying, I went to appointments where I was defeated and I could not speak about it after. Or I went through all the problem solving, and when I spoke to someone, a friend or a family, I didn't need them going through the problem solving because I just spent weeks doing that myself. I had to be very clear on what I needed from people, but then back to it of, you have, no matter your age, you've been in your body long enough to know what feels normal for your body and know what does not feel correct. And I think holding on to this does not feel right is so important, because people will either say, well, it could be worse, or that's not that concerning. Reactive was the first time that there were symptoms I've lived with for 10 years where I was told, actually, that's not something you need to live with. I was beginning to also accept things as just truths of my life. And, you know, the medical system doesn't set things up very easily to switch between doctors or find the right fit. But if someone isn't willing to like collaborate with you, and even less than that to listen, you're not going to get better. And so I think it's about finding the right team, but then also finding the right supports you need to be able to consistently trust yourself. because throughout the process, it's really easy to lose that self-trust. And you need to be surrounded by providers and family and friends that can back you up, that you're not going down this mental spiral, and if there is a mental component, that's obviously important, but to know to back up and support, like, what you need for your body, and you're not the difficult patient. And if you're being told you're not in the
Move
right
on.
spot, because they're
Right.
not going to continue listening. And so that's easier said than done. In my case, I was at the very end of my medical leave. There was not a lot of time to find a new doctor. As you know, I almost ran into some problems sometimes of being able to have a doctor sign off in time to go through, lists of things. So I think naturally there are the logistic pieces that none of us have control over as patients. But finding a place that will let you have as much control as possible, and a place that will look at every component, because I have gone to other places that are very well known and well respected, and no one looked at my sensory system, and no one looked at my autonomic system, and no one ever connected dots that I was the person with the laundry list of symptoms, where actually those symptoms were all connected, and no one was telling me that.
That's what I wanted to say, even for the clinicians listening. I know we can't change medical systems, but just that integrative approach all around made such a difference for Dana. And again, we were there 9 weeks, I think, and I only came in maybe 3 times. And I just remember the very first time, like the PT standing right with the OT and saying, "This is what we did today." That is huge, as opposed to waiting a week. And then when we left, her exit interviews, they had arranged, and oh my gosh, worked so hard to find a PT. Dana kept saying, "I will only work with someone that's been vetted. I'm not going through this again." Like, now she has the power to say no. And they said, "Don't worry. We don't believe patients should have to retell their story. They will get all the information they need." And that's huge, because for years I've heard Dana I don't want to say resistant in a bad way, but dreading going to appointments, because she said, "I'm so tired of telling my story." So for just that team approach, and that the patient leaves with everything to go home and continue their healing. And also, one other, and I know this is getting long, but
just like
I remember our very first appointment, we were so concerned about the POTS and Dana's breathing, and she couldn't do anything. They talked about a specialized program, and I'd say to Dana, "Have you started that yet? Like, if you have started that?" And again, we can't, because everything was worked on. All of a sudden, Dana's heart rate wasn't elevating, or if it was elevating, she finally knew that it was okay. All of a sudden, she could walk stairs. Like, there was not like and I truly believe it's because the team was all working together.
And they were. I was in those. I was in the meetings. So we had weekly meetings together. I was chatting with our OTs and PTs as well. And you're right, especially when we see multiple diagnoses together, a lot of those pieces end up just kind of progressing together. The heart rate control progressing along with the sensory and other autonomic pieces, and it was really wonderful to see. I think because I was at the clinics on Fridays when you were there, Dana, it was like every week I could see, like, one day you're barely walking in, and then one day you're like running through with resistance, and
I couldn't stop because I didn't know what my body was doing.
I know, it's like, what is happening here? And then you're sharing videos with me. It was just truly an honor, a pleasure to just be able to see it and be a part of it on the outskirts for me. But to see you really be a part of the team, that's what it felt like, Dana. It's like you are on the team, you're leading the team. So So exciting to see that progress, and just to see what you have learned and that you've shared here. Somebody said, is this recorded? So we'll post this recording. She said, my teen has POTS and FND, which, as you said, is very, very common.
Who would have
and
thought?
maybe interested. I know. It's very common. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And they want to listen to this interview. And, you know, thank you, Becky, for being here too, because I hear from a lot of parents. Because they have been through this with their kids, and I know they have often wanted, you know, I've had other parents say, oh, do you have another parent I can talk to or
Becky
ask
Handler.
questions of?
I will talk
On
to
NPR,
absolutely
yeah.
any parents.
I think my mom might have even had more reservations about coming than I did, just purely from the point of it was impacting my daily life. It was clearly having an impact on my mom, but we were not living in the same place. I had no other choice. And for my mom, her life was very much going to change if she came to reactive, where mine had been constantly changing for months. And so where I was kind of like, we committed, we're doing it. There's no other option left. Let's do it. My mom is definitely the one that needed to hear from someone else. So you're making the right choice. And I think speaking to someone else was really helpful. But I also just want to point out, and again, we clearly have a record of going over time here. But before we had even put out on the deposit, I want to say we spoke to you on a Friday. It might have even been a Saturday. Julie,
It was a Saturday.
Yeah, it was a Saturday. I think I missed our original appointment. We had to make it up. Yeah.
By that Monday, I think you had already emailed suggestions for new physicians in New York. And that was like the first time someone showed invested interest without the check attached. You know, I wasn't even a patient yet, and here was someone of like, we will do this
That was
together.
huge.
And that was, I think, you know, I wasn't even there yet, and that was the first sign of like, this is someone that understands that there's so much more than me just coming to an appointment that I have to handle, and someone's willing to help me with all the pieces that it takes to have a chronic illness, to have a long-term illness, and to be able to manage it. I was supported in every way. Things that didn't seem like a black and white PT thing or an OT category, I had support, whether it was front desk. Sorry, Caitlin, we called you and emailed you many, many times. Anyone and everyone there had the understanding of this is a lot, and we can help you with that. And I think that makes all the difference as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love our team.
So do we.
We need to.
But it's like you're right in that our whole team, Caitlin, the person that answers the phone, like Diane, Carter, everybody that you got to meet really does get it. They understand the process and the pieces that need to come into place. And it is much more. And you know, you've got us for life, for resources. I know we can't continue therapy while you're in Philadelphia because we don't have our Pennsylvania licenses, but we're here as a resource for you, for your family. We're going to keep advocating, and thank you for spending all of this time. I think I didn't even do the talking, but I'm losing my voice.
Sorry, we tend to do that.
No, I know, but your story is so rich and so common. And honestly, having you both here, it means so much to me. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Both of you. And we'll be sharing this video, and Becky, you might have people reaching out.
Absolutely. It was
ready.
a scary thing, and I would be more than happy to talk to a
And she
parent.
knows
It
how
was
to
a
do Instagram Live now.
I
So
know.
the possibilities are endless.
The possibilities are endless. This is amazing. Well, thank you both
thank you.
so much. It's also great to see you.
you.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
be in touch.
We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Bye.